Ilara's blood-curdling scream echoed through the alien stronghold, even as her torturers reveled in her agony, oblivious to the hell they had unleashed upon themselves. Her captors, the sadistic Akamarian elite led by Prince Fornax, believed they were merely tormenting another helpless refugee. Little did they know, the unassuming mechanic who had raised Ilara was no ordinary man, but David Reed, a battle-hardened human special forces operative, forged in the crucible of an intergalactic war that had nearly wiped out his species. For years, David and Ilara had lived in hiding on Akamar Prime, the last human survivors taking refuge among the technologically inferior Akamarians. David kept a low profile, his true identity concealed, as he worked to give his daughter a chance at a normal life. But now, with Ilara's abduction and torture, the facade had shattered, and the slumbering warrior within David awoke once more. As David raced through the alien landscape, his mind filled with thoughts of revenge, he knew that his actions would not only decide Ilara's fate, but also the future of Akamar Prime and the galaxy's perception of the human race. The Akamarians, in their arrogance, had underestimated the depths of a father's love and the indomitable human spirit. They had unwittingly set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of their society. As David embarked on a relentless quest to save his daughter and exact vengeance upon those who had dared to harm her. Navigating through the treacherous web of conspiracies and secrets that permeated the corrupt Akamarian monarchy, David's one-man war against the technologically superior aliens began to destabilize their civilization. His actions attracted the attention of other races who had long believed humans to be extinct, their curiosity piqued by the whispers of a vengeful ghost from a bygone era. Unbeknownst to the Akamarians, they had awoken a force they could scarcely comprehend, a father's unwavering love and the indomitable human will to survive against all odds. And as David Reed's war raged on, the galaxy would soon learn the true meaning of humanity, fuck yeah. David's heart pounded in his chest as he crept through the seedy underbelly of the Akamarian capital, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger. The stench of decay and desperation hung heavy in the air, a palpable reminder of the harsh realities of life under the oppressive monarchy. As he navigated the narrow, twisting alleys, David's mind raced with thoughts of Ilara, his beloved daughter, suffering at the hands of the sadistic Prince Fornax. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, causing David to instinctively reach for his concealed weapon. But as the figure stepped into the dim light, he realized it was a female Akamarian, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're the human, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "The one they're calling the ghost?" David nodded, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the potential threat. "And who are you?" "My name is Zara," she replied, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I'm part of the rebel network, fighting against the monarchy, and I think I can help you find your daughter." David's heart leaped at the mention of Ilara, but he maintained his composure. "How do I know I can trust you?" Zara met his gaze unflinchingly. "Because I've seen firsthand the cruelty of Prince Fornax. He's been torturing and experimenting on my people for years, trying to prove Akamarian superiority. I want to see him brought to justice as much as you do." As David listened to Zara's story, a flicker of hope ignited within him. With her knowledge of the rebel network and the layout of the royal palace, they might just stand a chance of rescuing Ilara and exposing the dark secrets at the heart of the Akamarian monarchy. Meanwhile, deep within the bowels of the palace, Ilara gritted her teeth against the searing pain that coursed through her body. Fornax loomed over her, his eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure as he watched her writhe in agony. "You think you're so strong, don't you?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "But even the strongest will break eventually, and when you do, I'll be there to watch you shatter." But Ilara refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she focused on gathering information, using her quick wit and intelligence to probe for weaknesses in her captor's defenses. As she listened to the guards' idle chatter and observed the comings and goings of the palace staff, a picture began to emerge of a larger conspiracy, one that hinted at a dark secret that could bring down the entire monarchy. Back in the alleys of the capital, David and Zara worked to formulate a plan. Drawing upon his extensive military training, David began to teach Zara and her fellow rebels advanced combat techniques and strategies that would give them a fighting chance against the technologically superior Akamarians. As they trained, Zara shared stories of life on Akamar Prime, painting a grim picture of a brutal society where the strong preyed upon the weak and where the ruling class would stop at nothing to maintain their power. David listened intently, his commitment hardening with each tale of injustice and cruelty. But even as they made progress, David knew that time was running out. With each passing moment, Ilara's suffering continued, and the risk of discovery grew higher. And as reports of the mysterious ghost began to circulate throughout the capital, Fornax's paranoia and instability only intensified. David knew that they were walking a razor's edge, and that one false move could spell disaster not only for Ilara, but for the entire planet. As he and Zara closed in on the palace, he steeled himself for the brutal confrontation that lay ahead, knowing that the fate of Akamar Prime hung in the balance. David and Zara slipped through the shadowy streets of the Akamarian capital, their footsteps nearly silent on the worn cobblestones. As they approached the looming silhouette of the royal palace, a figure emerged from an alcove, causing both to tense and ready their weapons. "At ease," the figure said, stepping into the dim light. "I'm Callan, military officer of the Akamarian forces." David's eyes narrowed. "Why should we trust you?" Callan's face twisted with disgust. "Because I've seen enough of the monarchy's cruelty. Your skills are impressive, human. I can help you infiltrate the palace if you promise to spare me when your rebellion succeeds." After a moment of tense silence, David nodded. "Deal. Now, how do we get in?" With Callan's guidance, they navigated the palace's defenses, disabling security systems and avoiding patrols. As they neared the dungeons, a group of elite guards, the Shadowblades, blocked their path. Fornax's personal guard, Callan whispered, were outmatched. David's lips curled into a grim smile. "We'll see about that." The human moved with preternatural speed, closing the distance before the Shadowblades could react. His fist connected with the first guard's face, the impact reverberating through the corridor. The others attacked, their energy weapons humming to life, but David was already among them. He dodged a blade of crackling energy, using the guard's momentum to throw him into his comrade. A swift kick disarmed another, and David snatched the weapon from the air, using it to incapacitate the remaining guards with precision strikes. Zara and Callan stared in awe as David stood amid the unconscious Shadowblades, barely winded. "How did you—" "No time," David cut her off. "We need to find Ilara." They pressed deeper into the palace, and David's blood ran cold as he overheard a conversation between two guards. "The human girl was just bait," one said. "The king wants her father. Says he's got tech that could change everything." David's face hardened. The stakes had just gotten higher. Meanwhile, Ilara had managed to slip her bonds, using a lockpick she'd fashioned from a loose screw in her cell. She crept through the winding corridors, her heart pounding as she evaded palace guards. A shout went up behind her. "The prisoners escaped!" Ilara sprinted down a hallway, her mind racing. She spotted a laundry chute and dove in, sliding down into a pile of linens just as guards rounded the corner. The chaos of Ilara's escape provided the perfect cover for David, Zara, and Callan to advance. But as they neared their goal, a familiar figure stepped out to block their path. "Well, well," Prince Fornax sneered, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the low light. "The ghost reveals himself at last." David didn't waste time with words. He charged, ducking under Fornax's first swing and delivering a crushing blow to the prince's midsection. Fornax stumbled back, surprise etched on his face. The two traded blows, Fornax's cybernetic strength matching David's skill. But with each exchange, David adapted, finding weaknesses in Fornax's reliance on technology. With a final decisive strike, David sent Fornax crashing to the ground. He stood over the prince, fist raised for a killing blow, but stopped short. "You're not worth it," David growled, leaving Fornax unconscious but alive. They found Ilara moments later, reuniting in a brief, fierce embrace before reality set in. Alarms blared throughout the palace as they raced towards the exit. "There!" Callan pointed to a heavily armored transport in the courtyard. They piled in, David taking the controls. Hold on, he warned, gunning the engine. The transport smashed through the palace gates, careening into the streets of the capital as Akamarian forces gave chase. As they sped through the city, David could see civilians stopping to stare, whispers spreading like wildfire. The story of their escape was already taking hold, igniting a spark of hope in the oppressed masses. But there was no time to celebrate. Akamarian ships screamed overhead, weapons charging as they bore down on the fleeing transport. David gripped the controls tighter, knowing that their fight for survival and for the future of Akamar Prime was far from finished. The transport shuddered as another blast from the pursuing Akamarian ships rocked the streets behind them. David's fingers tightening on the controls as he weaved through the crowded thoroughfares, narrowly avoiding panicked civilians. "We need to disappear," he growled, scanning the cityscape for an escape route. Zara leaned forward, pointing to a narrow alley. "There, the old industrial district. We can lose them in the abandoned factories." David nodded, wrenching the transport into a sharp turn. As they plunged into the shadows of dilapidated structures, the sounds of pursuit began to fade. In the days that followed, word of their daring escape spread like wildfire. The oppressed masses of Akamar Prime, long cowed by the monarchy's iron grip, found new hope in the tales of the human who had defied Prince Fornax and escaped the impregnable royal palace. Ilara watched in awe as their small band of rebels swelled with new recruits. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," she murmured to her father as they surveyed the growing encampment. David's expression remained grim. "Numbers alone won't be enough. We need to strike hard and fast before the monarchy can regroup." As they formulated their plans, an unexpected message arrived. King Ramelon himself requested a meeting with David, offering to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the conflict. "It's a trap," Zara insisted, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Agreed," David replied, "but it's also an opportunity we can't afford to ignore." Despite protests from Ilara and the others, David made his way to the palace under a flag of truce. As he entered the opulent throne room, he kept his senses alert for any sign of betrayal. King Ramelon rose from his throne, a forced smile on his face. "Ah, the infamous human. I must admit, you've caused quite a stir in our little corner of the galaxy." Before David could respond, a hidden door slid open behind him. Commander Tharok, leader of the Praetorian Guard, emerged with a squad of heavily armed soldiers. "Now!" Tharok bellowed. David spun, his combat reflexes kicking in, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. A stun blast caught him in the chest, and darkness engulfed him. When David regained consciousness, he found himself chained in a dungeon cell. Tharok loomed over him, a cruel smile twisting his features. "The king wants your secrets, human," he sneered, "and I'm going to enjoy extracting them from you." Back at the rebel camp, Ilara paced anxiously. "We should have heard something by now." As if in answer to her worries, every communication device in the camp suddenly crackled to life. King Ramelon's face appeared on screens throughout the city. "People of Akamar Prime," he intoned, "witness the fate of those who dare defy your rightful rulers." The image shifted to show David, battered and bloodied, strapped to a torture device. Ilara's heart clenched as she watched Tharok apply another round of agonizing shocks to her father's body. "Surrender now," Ramelon continued, "or watch this traitor's public execution." Zara turned to Ilara, her eyes blazing with purpose. "What are your orders?" Ilara took a deep breath, pushing aside her fear and anguish. She turned to address the assembled rebels, her voice steady and clear. "We're going in," she declared, "and we're bringing my father home." As the rebels mobilized for their daring assault on the palace, Ilara led a small strike team towards a hidden entrance to the underground tunnels. The sounds of battle erupted behind them as the main force engaged the Akamarian military, providing the distraction they needed. Inside the palace dungeons, David gritted his teeth against another wave of pain. Tharok leaned in close, his voice a menacing whisper. "Your daughter is coming for you," he hissed, "and when she does, I'll make you watch as I break her, just like I'm breaking you." David's eyes snapped open, a fire burning within them that made even Tharok take a step back. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he growled. As if in answer to his defiance, a low rumble shook the palace foundations. Alarms blared as a massive shape rose from the waters of the bay, dwarfing even the largest Akamarian warships. The ancient human vessel, awakened from its long slumber, had answered David's call. And as its weapons powered up, the true might of humanity was about to be unleashed upon Akamar Prime. The ancient vessel's massive form cast a shadow over the palace, its weapons systems humming with impossibly strong power. Inside the dungeons, David's eyes locked with the Orcs. In a burst of superhuman strength, David snapped his restraints and lunged at his captor. Tharok stumbled back, shock evident on his face as David's fist connected with his jaw. Alarms blared throughout the palace as David grappled with Tharok. The commander's cybernetic enhancements gave him an edge, but David's raw commitment and combat experience allowed him to hold his own. As they fought, Alara and her strike team burst into the room. "Dad!" she cried out, relief washing over her face. David ducked under Tharok's wild swing and delivered a devastating uppercut, sending the commander crashing to the ground. He turned to his daughter, breathing heavily. "Let's move." They raced through the winding corridors of the palace dungeons, dispatching guards as they went. But as they neared what seemed to be an exit, massive steel doors slammed shut around them. "No!" Ilara pounded on the unyielding metal. A holographic projection of King Ramelon appeared before them, his face twisted in a cruel smile. "Did you really think it would be that easy? You're trapped, and my Praetorian Guard will ensure you never leave this place alive." As if on cue, the sound of marching feet echoed through the halls. David's mind raced, searching for a way out. He knew there was only one option left. "Wait," he called out to Ramelon. "There's something you need to know about humanity." The king's hologram flickered, curiosity overcoming his triumphant expression. "Speak quickly, human." David took a deep breath. "The reason you think humans are technologically inferior? It's all a lie." He explained how humanity had willingly suppressed its scientific knowledge, fearing the attention of more advanced civilizations. The Akamarians listened in stunned silence as David revealed the truth behind humanity's apparent weakness. As David spoke, the sounds of battle erupted outside the sealed doors. Rebel forces, led by Zara, had breached the palace defenses. Among them was Jayla, a young Akamarian scientist wielding weapons of human design. The doors exploded inward, and rebel troops poured through the opening. Jayla's weapons cut through the Praetorian Guard's defenses like they were made of paper. "Impossible," Ramelon's hologram sputtered. "This can't be." But the king had one last card to play. With a maniacal laugh, he activated an ancient planetary defense system. "If I can't rule Akamar Prime, no one will." Alarms blared throughout the palace as the defense system powered up. David turned to Alara, his face grim. "We need to find the core and shut it down." They raced deeper into the palace, following the energy signatures to a hidden chamber beneath the Capitol. As they entered, David froze. The technology surrounding them was unmistakably human in origin. "Dad?" Alara's voice was uncertain. "What is this place?" Before David could respond, a figure stepped out of the shadows. King Ramelon, his eyes wild with desperation, held a plasma pistol to Alara's head. "Stay back," he shouted. "One more step and she dies." David's mind raced, torn between his mission and his daughter's safety. The fate of Akamar Prime hung in the balance, and he had mere moments to make a decision that would change everything. David's mind raced, analyzing the situation in microseconds. He locked eyes with Alara, a silent understanding passing between them. "Wait," David said, his voice steady. "I challenge you, Ramelon. One-on-one combat. If I win, you abdicate and allow a democratic government. If you win, I'll reveal all of humanity's technological secrets." Ramelon's eyes narrowed, his grip on Alara loosening slightly. "You dare challenge me?" "Unless you're afraid," David replied, his tone goading. The king released Alara, shoving her aside. "I accept. Your human arrogance will be your downfall." As Alara scrambled to safety, David and Ramelon circled each other. The throne room fell silent, rebel forces and remaining palace guards watching with suspenseful pause. David struck first, his fist connecting with Ramelan's jaw. The king staggered back, surprised by the human's speed and strength. He retaliated with a flurry of cybernetically enhanced blows, forcing David on the defensive. The two warriors clashed in a brutal dance, neither gaining a clear advantage. David's combat experience allowed him to anticipate Ramelan's moves, while the king's cybernetic enhancements gave him inhuman speed and power. As the fight wore on, David began to gain the upper hand. His relentless assault pushed Ramelan back, step by step. The king's face contorted with rage and disbelief. Suddenly, Ramelan's eyes gleamed with malicious intent. He tapped a hidden control on his wrist, activating a device embedded in his cybernetics. A wave of invisible energy washed over David, and he collapsed to his knees, his higher brain functions shutting down. "Dad!" Ilara cried out, held back by Zara. Ramelan loomed over David, sneering. "You fool! Did you think I would fight fair?" The king raised his fist, ready to deliver a killing blow. But before he could strike, Jayla's voice rang out from the crowd. "Not so fast, Your Majesty." Jayla stepped forward, holding a small device. She pressed a button, and David's eyes snapped back into focus. He rolled away just as Ramelan's fist smashed into the floor. "How?" Ramelan sputtered, his face pale. "Your technology isn't as unique as you think," Jayla replied, a hint of pride in her voice. David sprang to his feet, reinvigorated. Ramelan, caught off guard, barely had time to raise his defenses before David unleashed a devastating combination of strikes. The king's cybernetic enhancements sparked and sputtered, overwhelmed by the human's onslaught. With a final, thunderous blow, David sent Ramelan crashing to the ground. The throne room fell silent as the king lay motionless, his defeat absolute. Slowly, painfully, Ramelan pushed himself to his knees. I yield," he gasped, his voice barely audible. A cheer erupted from the rebel forces. Ilara rushed to her father, embracing him tightly. As the initial euphoria subsided, David addressed the assembled crowd. "The war is over. It's time to build a new Akamar Prime, one of freedom and democracy." In the days that followed, a transitional government was established, led by Zara and the Rebel Council. The Akamarian people, long oppressed, embraced their newfound liberty with cautious optimism. But even as they celebrated their victory, David and Ilara found themselves at the center of a new, more complex challenge. Representatives from various galactic factions began to make covert contact, each with their own agenda. An elegant, otherworldly being approached them one evening, its form shimmering with barely suppressed energy. "I am an emissary from the Celestial Concordat," it intoned. "We wish to discuss an alliance." Before David could respond, a gruff voice interrupted. "Don't trust them, human. The Concordat will use you and discard you." The speaker, a battle-scarred warrior from a militant species, emerged from the shadows. "Join the Galactic Defense League instead. We can offer you protection." David exchanged a wary glance with Ilara. The implications of their victory on Akamar Prime were far-reaching, attracting attention from forces they barely understood. As they navigated this new diplomatic minefield, neither David nor Ilara noticed the cloaked figure observing them from afar. The alien wore the insignia of a powerful military cabal, its eyes fixed on the humans with predatory intent. The figure activated a secure comlink. "Target acquired. Prepare for extraction. We will have that human technology, whatever it takes." The cloaked figure's transmission was cut short as a hand clamped down on their shoulder. They spun around to face Jayla, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "I think you'd better come with me," she said, her voice low and dangerous. As Jayla led the intruder away, David and Ilara found themselves at the center of a diplomatic maelstrom. The emissaries from various galactic factions pressed in, each vying for the humans' attention and allegiance. Amidst the chaos, a new player entered the game. Admiral Kralkax of the Xyrillian Empire approached Ilara, his reptilian features arranged in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Greetings, daughter of Earth," he said, his voice a sibilant whisper. "I bring an offer of alliance from the Xyrillian Empire. We have long admired humanity's resilience." Ilara's instincts screamed danger, but she maintained a neutral expression. "That's a generous offer, Admiral. Perhaps we could discuss it further." Kralkax's eyes gleamed. "Of course, I propose a meeting aboard my flagship. Neutral ground, as it were." David, overhearing the exchange, stepped in. "We'd be honored, Admiral. When shall we expect your invitation?" As Kralkax slithered away to make arrangements, David pulled Ilara aside. "I don't trust him," he muttered. "Neither do I," Ilara replied. "But we need allies, Dad. We can't face the galaxy alone." Days later, they found themselves aboard Kralkax's massive flagship, surrounded by the sleek, organic architecture favored by the Xyrillians. The Admiral led them to a conference room, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent light. As negotiations began, Kralkax's true nature emerged. He spoke of conquest, of using humanity's combat prowess to crush the Xyrillians' enemies. David's stomach turned as he realized the Admiral's intent, to capture him and extract his knowledge by force. But it was Kralkax's next move that truly stunned them. The Admiral produced a holographic display showing grainy footage of a planet wreathed in flames. "Tell me, David," Kralkax hissed, "do you recognize this world?" David's face paled. "Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter," Kralkax replied. "What matters is what it shows. The destruction of the Zinthar, a peaceful race, by human hands." Ilara turned to her father, shock evident on her face. "Dad, what is he talking about?" David closed his eyes, his voice heavy with regret. "It was during the war. The Zinthar world was in a strategically vital location. We needed their resources, their technology. They refused to choose sides." "So you slaughtered them," Kralkax finished, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "We did what we had to do to survive." David's fist slammed on the table. "I carry the weight of that decision every day, but I'd make it again to ensure humanity's survival." Ilara stared at her father, torn between horror at his actions and admiration for his honesty. In that moment, she realized the true burden of leadership he had carried all these years. Kralkax, sensing the tension, moved to exploit it. "Join us, Ilara. Leave behind your father's legacy of destruction. Together, we can forge a new future for the galaxy." Ilara's gaze hardened. "No," she said firmly. "My father may have made difficult choices, but at least he's honest about them. You, Admiral, reek of deception." Kralkax's facade crumbled. With a snarl, he activated a hidden control panel. "Then you'll both die here." Alarms blared as energy fields sprang up around David and Ilara, but David was quicker. He lunged forward, tackling Kralkax and disrupting the activation sequence. "Run!" he shouted to Ilara as he grappled with the Xyrillian. Ilara hesitated for a split second before racing out of the room. She needed to find a way to contact their ship, to warn Akamar Prime of the Xyrillian threat. As she navigated the twisting corridors of the alien vessel, the sounds of battle echoed behind her. She prayed her father would be okay, even as she focused on their escape. Suddenly, a group of Xyrillian soldiers rounded the corner ahead. Ilara ducked into an alcove, her heart pounding. She needed a plan, and fast. The fate of not just her father, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Ilara's mind raced as she assessed her options. The Xyrillian soldiers were closing in, their heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor. She glanced around, spotting a maintenance hatch above her. With a swift, practiced motion, she leapt up, grabbed the edge, and pulled herself into the cramped service tunnel. The sound of her father's struggle with Kralkax faded as she crawled through the ship's innards. She needed to find a way to contact their vessel and warn Akamar Prime. As she navigated the maze of conduits, a plan began to form. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Ilara lost her balance, tumbling out of an open vent and onto the floor of what appeared to be a communication center. She scrambled to her feet, facing the startled Xyrillian technicians. Before they could react, Ilara sprang into action. Her combat training kicked in as she incapacitated the aliens with swift, precise strikes. With the room secured, she turned to the alien technology before her. "Come on," she muttered, her fingers dancing over the unfamiliar controls. Years of working with her father had taught her the basics of most alien systems. After a tense minute, she managed to establish a connection to their ship. "This is Alara. We're under attack by the Xyrillians. Prepare for immediate extraction and alert Akamar Prime of the threat." As she finished transmitting, the door burst open. David stumbled in, his clothes torn and face bloodied. "We need to move. Now!" They raced through the corridors, alarms blaring around them. They reached the hangar just as their ship, piloted remotely by Jayla, smashed through the force field. David and Alara leapt aboard as it screamed past, the hangar bay exploding behind them from the sudden decompression. As they accelerated away from the Xyrillian flagship, David turned to his daughter. "We can't go back to Akamar Prime. It's not safe." Alara nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Where to, then?" David's eyes hardened with persistence. "We need allies. It's time to take the fight to them." In the days that followed, David, Alara, and a hand-picked crew of Akamarian rebels embarked on their interstellar quest aboard an ancient human warship. Their mission, to seek out potential allies against the Xyrillian Empire and other threats to humanity's resurgence. Their first target was Zarmina, a harsh desert world under Xyrillian occupation. Intelligence suggested an underground resistance movement that could prove valuable. As they approached the planet, Alara studied the swirling storms visible from orbit. "Those sandstorms look deadly," she observed. David nodded grimly. "They are, but they'll also provide us cover for our landing." The ship plunged into Zarmina's atmosphere, buffeted by howling winds and stinging sand. David's expert piloting brought them down in a hidden canyon, away from Xyrillian patrols. As they stepped out onto the scorching sand, Alara activated her protective gear. "How do we find the resistance in this wasteland?" Before David could answer, a group of figures materialized from the swirling sand, weapons trained on the newcomers. At their head stood a fierce woman with piercing eyes and sand-scarred skin. "I am Kylara," she announced, her voice hard as steel. "State your purpose here, off-worlders, or prepare to die." David stepped forward, hands raised. "We're here to help. We've fought the Xyrillians before, and we can do it again." Kylara's eyes narrowed. "Words are cheap. Prove your worth." Without warning, she lunged at David, a vibroblade appearing in her hand. David reacted instantly, deflecting her strike and countering with a swift series of blows that left Kylara disarmed and on her back. For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Then Kylara laughed, a sound like rough stones grinding together. "Perhaps you're not completely useless after all." As they followed Kylara to the hidden rebel base, Alara sensed an opportunity. She fell into step beside the Zarminan leader, engaging her in conversation about their shared struggles against Xyrillian oppression. By the time they reached the underground cavern that served as the resistance headquarters, Kylara's initial skepticism had begun to thaw. She gathered her lieutenants, and David laid out a bold plan. "There's a Xyrillian supply depot not far from here," he explained, pointing to a holographic map. "If we can raid it, we'll not only gain valuable resources, but also strike a blow against their operations." Kylara considered the proposal, then nodded sharply. "It's risky, but it could work. We'll do it." The raid was a masterclass in guerrilla tactics. David's team, working in concert with Kylara's rebels, struck swiftly and decisively. They breached the depot's defenses, neutralized the guards, and made off with a cache of advanced weaponry before the Xyrillians could mount an effective response. As they sped away from the burning depot, Alara saw something she hadn't expected in Kylara's eyes: hope. The success of the raid galvanized the Zarminan resistance. More locals flocked to join their ranks, emboldened by the victory against their oppressors. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed as though the tide was turning. But their elation was short-lived. As David and Alara prepared to coordinate their next move with Kylara, alarms blared throughout the rebel base. "Massive Xyrillian force incoming," a scout reported, panic evident in his voice. "Led by General Narkon himself." Kylara's face hardened. "They must have tracked us from the raid. We need to evacuate." As chaos erupted around them, David made a split-second decision. "We'll cover your retreat. Get your people to safety." Kylara clasped his arm, a warrior's salute. We'll meet again, off-worlder. The fight's not over. David, Ilara, and their crew raced back to their ship, drawing Xyrillian fire away from the fleeing Zarmanans. As they lifted off, the magnitude of the Xyrillian response became clear. The sky was filled with enemy ships, raining destruction upon the desert below. "We can't stay and fight," Ilara said, her voice tight with frustration. "There are too many." David nodded grimly, pushing the engines to their limit as they broke atmosphere. "We'll be back," he promised, watching Zarmina recede behind them. "But first, we need to find more allies." As they plotted their next move, a coded transmission crackled through the ship's communication system. The message was brief, cryptic, but unmistakable in its urgency. "Karis, Sanctuary, Hope." David and Ilara exchanged glances. It wasn't much to go on, but in their current situation, any lead was worth pursuing. "Set course for Karis," David ordered, his eyes fixed on the star map before him. "Let's see what this sanctuary has to offer." As the ship entered hyperspace, leaving the turmoil of Zarmina behind, neither David nor Ilara could shake the feeling that their journey was only just beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with both dangers and potential allies. And somewhere out there, the key to defeating the Xyrillian Empire awaited discovery. The hyperdrive engines pulsed with an otherworldly energy as David and Ilara's ship emerged from hyperspace near Karis. The planet loomed before them, a swirling mass of azure oceans and emerald land masses. "Sanctuary," Ilara murmured, studying the readouts. "But what kind of hope can we find here?" Her question was answered moments later as a fleet of sleek biomechanical vessels rose from the planet's surface to meet them. A transmission crackled through their comms. "Unidentified vessel, state your purpose or be destroyed." David leaned forward, his voice steady. "We seek sanctuary and allies against the Xyrillian Empire." A tense silence followed before the reply came. "Follow our escort. Any deviation will result in immediate termination." As they descended through Karis' atmosphere, flanked by the alien ships, the true nature of the planet revealed itself. Vast underwater cities sprawled beneath the waves, connected by shimmering energy conduits. On the scattered islands, towering structures of living coral and crystalline material reached towards the sky. Their ship touched down on a floating platform, and David and Ilara emerged to face a delegation of the planet's inhabitants. The Trellcore, as they called themselves, were amphibious beings with iridescent scales and large, expressive eyes. The leader, a female named Zora, approached them. "We have heard whispers of your exploits, humans, but words alone do not earn trust. You must prove your worth." Over the following days, David and Ilara worked tirelessly alongside the Trellcore, demonstrating their skills and sharing knowledge of Xyrillian weaknesses. Ilara's quick thinking during an undersea training exercise saved a group of young Trellcore from a rogue predator, earning her the respect of the cautious aliens. As bonds formed and strategies were discussed, news arrived of a massive Xyrillian fleet gathering near Zarmina. The time for action had come. "We cannot stand idly by while others suffer," Zora declared, her gill flaps rippling with emotion. "The Trellcore will join your fight." With their new allies secured, David unveiled his audacious plan. "We strike at the heart of their power," he said, pulling up a holographic display of Kralkax's flagship. "Take out their leader, and we can force a regime change." The combined fleet of human, Zarmanan, and Trellcore vessels dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the Zarmina system. The element of surprise was on their side as they tore through the unprepared Xyrillian defenses. Ilara piloted their ship through the chaos, weaving between energy blasts and debris. Trellcore aquatic fighters swarmed around them, their bioweapons tearing through Xyrillian shields with terrifying efficiency. "There!" David shouted, pointing to a massive vessel at the center of the Xyrillian formation. "Kralkax's flagship. Kylara, are your teams ready?" The Zarminan leader's voice crackled through the comms. "Born ready. Just get us close enough." Ilara gritted her teeth, pushing the ship's engines to their limit as they screamed towards their target. Kylara's assault pods launched, streaking towards the flagship's hull. Explosions blossomed across its surface as they breached the outer defenses. "We're in," Kylara reported, "making our way to the bridge now." David turned to Alara. "Think you can get us aboard?" She nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "Watch me." Their ship shuddered as it smashed through the weakened shields, skidding to a halt in a secondary hangar. David and Alara leapt out, weapons at the ready, and fought their way through the corridors towards the bridge. They arrived to find Kylara and her warriors engaged in fierce combat with Kralkax's personal guard. David's eyes locked onto the Xyrillian admiral, who snarled in defiance. "You!" Kralkax spat. "I should have killed you when I had the chance." David raised his weapon. "Your reign of terror ends now, Kralkax." The two leaders clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle, while Alara and the rebels battled to secure the bridge. Sparks flew as she worked to override the ship's systems, her fingers flying over alien controls. With a final desperate lunge, David knocked Kralkax to the ground, pinning the alien leader beneath him. "It's over," he growled. A cheer went up as the flagship's weapons powered down. They had done it. Kralkax was captured, and the heart of the Xyrillian war machine was under their control. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared as a massive hyperspatial rift tore open nearby. Through it poured an armada that dwarfed anything they had faced before. "By the void," Kylara breathed. "What is that?" Ilara's face paled as she read the incoming transmissions. "It's Grand Vizier Azeroth. He's brought the entire Xyrillian home fleet." Energy beams lanced out from the new arrivals, hammering their defenses. The captured flagship rocked under the assault as Azeroth's voice boomed through every speaker. "Fools! Did you think we would allow our empire to fall so easily? Surrender now, and your deaths will be merciful." David's mind raced as he assessed their dire situation. Then his eyes fell on the flagship's navigational controls, and a dangerous idea formed. "Alara," he called out, "how powerful is this ship's hyperdrive?" She frowned, catching onto his train of thought. "Powerful enough to tear a hole in reality if pushed hard enough. But Dad, that's suicide." David's expression hardened. "Maybe not. There are legends of a place beyond known space, a realm of ancient godlike beings. If we can reach it—" "That's insane," Kylara protested. "We should stand and fight." But Alara stood by her father's side. "No, he's right. It's our only chance." As the ship shuddered under Azeroth's relentless assault, David took the controls. "Everyone hang on. This is going to get rough." The hyperdrive spooled up, its energy readings spiking off the charts. Reality itself seemed to warp around them as David pushed the engines beyond their limits. With a blinding flash and a sensation of being turned inside out, the flagship vanished from normal space-time. They hurtled through a realm of swirling colors and impossible geometries, the laws of physics breaking down around them. When they emerged, it was into a star system unlike any they had ever seen. Planets of crystal and energy orbited a sentient sun, and in the distance, structures of impossible scale hovered in the void. Before them appeared a being of pure light, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "Welcome, children of flesh and time. We are the ancients. You have come seeking aid against the Xyrillians. But first, you must prove yourselves worthy." David and Alara exchanged a determined look. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together. The fate of the stars hung in the balance. The ancients' luminous form pulsed with energy as it spoke directly into their minds. To prove yourselves worthy, you must face the ultimate trial. A shimmering portal materialized before them, its swirling depths hinting at untold challenges. David stepped forward, but Alara placed a hand on his arm. "I'll go first," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. David opened his mouth to protest, but the tenacity in his daughter's face silenced him. He nodded, watching as Alara stepped through the portal. Hours passed in agonizing silence. David paced the crystalline chamber, his mind conjuring increasingly dire scenarios. When the portal finally flared to life again, he rushed forward. Alara emerged, but she was changed. Her body crackled with otherworldly energy, skin now a mosaic of flesh and gleaming technology. Her eyes, once warm and expressive, now held the cold depths of space itself. "The artifact," she said, her voice resonating with newfound power. "I understand now." The ancient's form shimmered. "The weapon of your ancestors is yours to wield. But beware, for its power comes at a great cost." Ilara turned to David, her gaze devoid of the affection he'd always seen there. "Father," she said, the word clinical and detached, "we must act swiftly to neutralize the Zyrillian threat." David reached out to embrace her, but Ilara stepped back. "There's no time for sentiment," she stated. "Billions of lives hang in the balance." With a gesture, Ilara opened a rift in space-time. Through it, David glimpsed the Zyrillian armada, still besieging their allies. Ilara raised her hand, channeling the artifact's power. "Wait!" David cried. "We need to think this through. We can't just—" But Ilara was beyond reason. A beam of pure energy lanced from her palm, tearing through the rift and obliterating an entire Zyrillian battle group. The ancient's chamber trembled with the shockwave. "Collateral damage is irrelevant," Ilara intoned. "The Empire must fall at any expense." David's heart sank as he realized the full extent of what the artifact had done to his daughter. He turned to the ancient, his voice urgent. "I need to undergo the trial. Now." The luminous being seemed to hesitate. "The process is irreversible. Are you certain?" David watched as Ilara prepared to unleash another devastating attack. "I'm certain," he said grimly. The portal engulfed him, and David found himself adrift in a sea of pure information. Cosmic truths seared themselves into his mind as his body was unmade and reforged. When he emerged, he too was transformed, his humanity fused with powers beyond mortal comprehension. Ilara turned, sensing the change in her father. "You seek to stop me," she stated, raising her hand. "I cannot allow that." The air crackled as father and daughter faced each other, the fate of galaxies hanging in the balance between them.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.